It was the coldest day of my life. Even though the sunlight streaming through the window warmed the castle's stone walls slightly, I still felt as though my blood were about to freeze solid. Alpha Kane, my husband, my destined mate, the king of the pack to whom I had sworn allegiance for 7 years, stood before me, towering like an insurmountable mountain. He didn't even glance at me, merely looking down to adjust the wolf tooth buttons on his cuffs, his tone as calm as if he were instructing the kitchen to add an extra dish to tonight's menu. Emily is unwell. You will go tend to her for the next few days. Whatever she desires, you will see to it personally. Brew tea, comb her hair, take her for walks. Do not let her grow bored. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Can you imagine it? Your Alpha, the very soulmate the moon god bound to you, actually ordering you to serve as a maid to his mortal mistress. It felt as though a wolf's claws were tearing my chest open. But the pain didn't come from my flesh. It came from the bond itself. The connection bestowed by the moon god trembled violently within me, like a red-hot chain snapping inch by inch. I caught the lingering scent on his shirt collar, a cloying rose perfume, Emily's favorite. I dared not think about how he'd gotten it on him. The wolf inside me howled softly in my chest, desperate to break free, to bite that woman's throat, to throw itself into Kane's arms, and demand an explanation. But I held it down with all my might. 7 years ago, when we first became mates, I naively believed we were a match made in heaven. Under the full moon, he swore an oath to protect me with his life, that my pain was his pain, and that not even the moon goddess could tear us apart. But those words now sound more ironic than the howling wind outside the window. Did you hear me? He finally looked up, his silver-gray eyes sweeping over me, devoid of any warmth, only impatience. Don't make me say it again. I lowered my gaze, digging my nails deep into the palms of my hands until blood seeped out drop by drop. Yet I felt no pain. I merely nodded slightly and turned toward Emily's room. Every step felt like walking on a razor's edge. The attendants lining the corridor kept their heads bowed, afraid to look at me. They all understood what this order meant. Alpha Luna, mistress of the wolf pack, had been reduced to a human maid. This was not merely humiliation. It was a public rejection. Standing before that carved wooden door, I heard light laughter coming from inside. I pushed the door open. Emily was reclining on the sofa, wearing a silk gown I'd never seen before, with the moonstone bracelet, the heirloom of every Luna wrapped around her wrist. When she saw me, a triumphant smile slowly curved her lips. She held out her hand and said lazily, "My feet are a little sore. Rub them for me." In that moment, my world came crashing down. But do you know what? What truly made me resolve to act wasn't this humiliation, but the life growing inside me, not even 2 months old. Just 3 days ago, I secretly had the old herbalist take my pulse. She told me with delight, "Luna, you are carrying a bloodline. This is the Alpha's first heir." I had planned to tell him at that weekend's moon banquet, hoping this child might rekindle a shred of his former tenderness. But now, watching him trample me into the mud for the sake of another, I suddenly realized he doesn't deserve to know this child exists. I knelt at Emily's feet, my fingers mechanically massaging her ankles, yet all I could hear was my own wolf's howl. Run with the child. Run as far away as possible. I looked up at the endless dark forest beyond the window, and a mad idea spread through my body like wildfire. I was no longer that pitiful woman, waiting to be granted love. I was a mother, and a mother is willing to do anything for her child. That night, when the entire castle had fallen asleep, I took the moonstone bracelet, not because I coveted the jewelry, but because it carried the moon goddess's blessing, ensuring the heir's safe birth. I cast one last glance at Kane's room, where a faint light still burned. Perhaps he was figuring out how to lull Emily to sleep. Perhaps he hadn't even remembered I existed. I stroked my still, flat belly, forced to smile through gritted teeth, yet tears rolled down my cheeks. You'll never know what you've lost. I wrapped my cloak tightly around myself and slipped through the ancient tunnels to climb over the city walls. Moonlight lay like silver blades across the forest path. The wolf within me growled a warning of what lay ahead, but I did not look back. With every step, the bond tore a deeper wound in my soul, as if trying to rip Kane's existence from my life by force. The pain nearly brought me to my knees, but I knew that if I stayed now, my child would live forever in the shadow of another woman. And so, I melted into the night. By the time the first snowflake landed on my shoulder, I had already ventured deep into the Shadow Mountains, a place even werewolves dare not tread lightly. Behind me, the castle's horns had yet to sound. He had not yet realized that his Luna, the woman he treated as a slave, was carrying his only child, vanishing forever and irrevocably from his world. And the true story had only just begun at that moment. For fate is never a pawn to be manipulated at will. When you trample your most precious gem into the mud, thorns will sprout from the earth, piercing you until you bleed, until you kneel down and spend the rest of your life searching for her. I spent my first night in the Shadow Mountains, curled up inside the hollow of an old, dead pine tree. The hollow still reeked of the stench of wild beasts, but at least it sheltered me from the mountain winds. I wrapped my cloak tighter and tighter around myself, my hand pressed against my lower abdomen, as if doing so could share my body heat with that life, still no bigger than a pea. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Kane's silver, gray eyes flashed through my mind. Not the cold detachment he showed when giving orders, but the look he'd given me under the full moon 7 years ago. Back then, he wasn't as hard and unyielding as a block of iron as he is now. His eyes held moonlight, the wildness of a wolf, and a devotion that would break any girl's heart. We met at the Moon Goddess Festival. I was 17 at the time, traveling with the pack to pay homage at the royal city, blending into the crowd and not daring to lift my head. Yet, it was he, Kane Northen, who had just inherited the Alpha's title and struck fear into the hearts of the entire wolf clan, who descended the 12 stone steps, walked straight through hundreds of pack members, and stopped right in front of me. He lowered his head, his nose almost touching my hair, and gave a gentle sniff. Then every werewolf in the square heard his deep proclamation. "It is she, the moon goddess's destined mate for me." I still remember that moment to this day, not out of pride, but because the bond struck me like lightning in that instant. My wolf sensed another flame within him, a flame that burned in my veins, making me want to run to him, throw myself into his arms, and sink my teeth into his collar, never to let go. The moon goddess's bond is no fairy tale. It is a truth etched into our very marrow. When you meet your destined one, your soul will recognize him, whether you want to or not. He knelt on one knee in front of everyone, took my hand, and swore to the full moon, "I will protect you with my life. Your pain is my pain. Your tears are my blood. Not even the moon goddess can separate us." Can you believe it? Those words, those vows that made every girl in the room cry. Now, looking back, feel like nothing more than a carefully orchestrated deception. The first 3 years of our marriage were indeed the brightest light of my life. He would save the tenderest venison for me when he returned from the hunt. He would stay awake all night when I had a fever, wiping my forehead with cool spring water. He even defied the elders' rules to let me participate in tribal meetings, because I had read human chronicles and could offer the tribe a different perspective. I thought this was a gift from the moon goddess, that our love could withstand anything. But in the 4th year, everything changed. That year, the Blackstone tribe of the North suddenly joined forces with the human demon hunting group to launch a surprise attack on us. Kane led his troops into battle and was gone for 4 whole months. When he returned, his armor was stained with blood, yet he held an unconscious human woman in his arms, Emily. He said she had saved his life on the battlefield with her herbal remedies, and for that she had nearly been executed as a traitor by her own people. He said she was homeless, and we must treat her with the respect due to a savior. At first, I didn't mind. Though humans and werewolves have been enemies for generations, a debt of life-saving gratitude cannot be forgotten. I personally arranged a room for Emily, applied the finest medicines to her wounds, and even let her dine at my table. But I gradually sensed something was amiss. The look in Kane's eyes as he gazed at her grew softer and more lingering, a gaze that should have belonged only to me, the mate chosen by the moon goddess. It was only later that I learned of an ancient curse practiced in Blackrock, one capable of obscuring the moon goddess's bond and causing the alpha to develop illusions of love for someone he should not love. Perhaps Emily herself didn't realize she was being used as a pawn. Perhaps she truly was innocent. But regardless, my husband, the man who swore to protect me with his life, was slipping through my fingers bit by bit. His wolf no longer answered my call. He could no longer sense my scent. He even called out her name in the night, and the bond the moon goddess bestowed upon me has become the cruelest of instruments of torture. I can feel Kane's coldness. His distance cuts into my heart like a knife, and I can vaguely sense his attraction to Emily, as if I were being forcibly held underwater, unable to scream even though I want to. I never told him how many ways I tried to win him back. I sought out the old prophetess on Dark Moon Peak, begging her to untangle the bonds that blinded me. I knelt alone under the full moon for an entire night, praying for the moon goddess to guide me. I dripped my own blood into his wine, an ancient summoning ritual, only to have him push the cup away in disgust. After that, I stopped trying. When you rip a heart from your chest, offer it to someone time and again, only to have it rejected and cast to the ground each time, you too will learn to hide your heart, to hide it where no one can see. And now, the only thing keeping me going is this faint, unformed little life growing inside me. He is the last bond between Kane and me, and the only thing in this life that truly belongs to me. For him, I can venture into the Black Forest, where even adult werewolves dare not tread. I can endure the soul, searing pain of a bond being torn apart. I can become a fugitive. The wind swept through the pine grove, carrying the howls of unknown beasts from afar. I opened my eyes and gazed at the small patch of starlight, fragmented by branches and leaves, outside the tree hollow. I told myself, from today on, I am no longer his Luna. I am simply myself, a mother. By the 5th day, my strength had finally reached its limit. Deep within the Shadow Mountains lies a forgotten ancient ruin, where massive stone pillars jut out from the mountainside, their surfaces covered in glowing moss that looks like phosphorescent flames growing from white bones. I leaned against the rock face and slowly slid down to sit. My feet were already raw and bleeding, and my ankles were swollen like tree bark soaked in water. The edges of my cloak had been torn to shreds by thorns, and my hair was tangled with dead leaves and dirt. Panting heavily, I fished the last half of a hard tooth, breaking dry biscuit from my bosom, broke it into 3 pieces, stuffed 2 into my mouth, and carefully wrapped the 3rd one up again to tuck back into my bosom. I couldn't eat it all. Tomorrow's journey still lay ahead. I looked down at my lower abdomen, placed my palm gently over it, and spoke in a voice so hoarse it was barely audible. Hang in there a little longer. Mommy will take you to a safe place. At that very moment, I thought I was hallucinating. On the half-collapsed altar in the distance, something flickered, not moonlight, not phosphorescence, but a gentle, rippling silver-blue glow. It seemed to be answering me, flickering on and off like a heartbeat. The wolf within me suddenly grew alert. It wasn't fear, but a more ancient emotion, as if something deep within my bloodline had been awakened. I struggled to my feet and limped toward that light. Rubble clattered beneath my feet. I stumbled twice, my knees scraping against sharp stone edges, but I had no time to feel the pain. That light was too strange. It didn't resemble any natural force, but rather some kind of consciousness waiting for me. Only upon drawing near did I see clearly that it was a small stone casket embedded in a crevice, its surface engraved with ancient script. I didn't recognize. But the moment I reached out to touch those engravings, my mind was suddenly struck as if by lightning, flooded with thousands upon thousands of images and sounds. I saw the moon goddess in her original form upon her first descent. I saw the first generation of wolf clan ancestors kneeling beneath the full moon, swearing their allegiance. I saw a beam of light stolen from the moon, goddess's altar, and sealed within this mountain range. And the name of that light echoed in my ears like a sigh, the moon goddess's tear. I mulled over those 4 words, feeling every hair on my body stand on end. Ancient legends speak of it, saying that when the moon goddess created the first wolf clan, she shed a single tear. That tear fell to the mortal realm and transformed into a divine artifact, possessing the power to rewrite bonds. It can dispel all veils of darkness, restore twisted bonds to their original form, and reignite lost love. But the price is that the user must sacrifice their most precious possession. I knelt on the gravel and cupped the stone casket in my hands. The lid was light. A gentle touch reduced it to ashes. Inside lay a teardrop-shaped pendant from which a silvery blue light shone, illuminating my face with a warmth like my mother's hand. I clasped the pendant in my palm and pressed it against my heart. And finally, tears began to flow uncontrollably. It wasn't out of fear, nor was it out of despair, but because in these most desolate, darkest, and most forgotten ruins, I had found a possibility, a chance to turn my love's fortunes around, a chance for Kane to see the truth, a chance for the child in my womb to have a father. But just then, a familiar yet unfamiliar call suddenly rang in my ears. Selena. My whole body froze instantly. That voice pierced through the mountains, through the wind, and through the lingering bond within me, like a red-hot needle piercing straight into my heart. It was Kane's voice. He was using our bond to find me. He'd employed the ancient Wolf King's tracking rite, a forbidden art reserved only for alphas conducting the most extensive search for a mate, one that drained vast reserves of vital energy with every use. Why would he do this? Hadn't he already rejected me? Wasn't Emily enough for him? I clenched my teeth tightly, tucking the pendant deep into my collar against my skin, while desperately suppressing the wolf within me, refusing to let it respond in any way. But the bond works both ways. He could sense me, and I could sense him. In that instant, through his eyes, I saw the castle. Every last werewolf warrior had poured out, torches forming a winding dragon of fire that stretched from the city gates all the way to the foot of the mountain. He was leading 3 hunting parties himself, riding that giant wolf as black as a nightmare, racing toward the Shadow Mountains. I had never seen an expression like the one on his face. Not anger, not the frantic search for a lost object, but a sense of collapse. Yes, collapse. That alpha who stood so high above all others, that man who could crush mountains. His jaw was trembling. His eyes were red as if they might bleed, and his hands were clenched so tightly around the reins that his knuckles had turned white. He kept calling my name through the bond, his voice growing hoarser and more frantic with each cry. I could even hear the words in his heart, the words he dared not speak aloud. I was wrong, come back. But it was too late. I pressed the pendant closer to my chest and turned to continue deeper into the mountains. Every step I took trampled on his calls. Every step pulled at the bond, making it hurt all the more. Yet I did not look back, for a terrible thought had occurred to me. The more he searched for me like this, the more he exposed the chaos within his heart. But was this chaos because he had truly seen the truth, or simply because I had disobeyed him and run away, shattering his authority? I wasn't sure. I dared not take the risk. I stroked the pendant, my mind filled with a single thought, before the moon goddess gave me an answer, before he truly distinguished love from falsehood. I would never let him find me. And above these mountains, heavy leaden, gray clouds had gathered at some point, and a cold wind swept in from the north, carrying the scent of ice and snow. The first snowflake fell upon my shoulder once more, but this time I looked up at the sky, filled with snow ready to pour down, and suddenly smiled, because I remembered the conditions for activating the moon goddess's tear. That person must walk an ancient path, must reach the forgotten moon goddess temple deep within these mountains, and must, there facing the full moon, awaken the slumbering power within the pendant with their own blood and tears. And that temple of the moon, it is said, lies hidden beyond these snow-capped mountains. Fate has finally begun to bare its true fangs. The blizzard hit faster and harder than I had imagined. At first, it was just a few scattered snowflakes, drifting lightly onto my eyelashes, only to melt into droplets of water in an instant from my body heat. But by the time I crossed the third ridge, it was as if a gash had been torn open in the sky. A dense white deluge poured down like a waterfall, and the wind, laced with ice shards, sliced across my face. Each strike felt like a blade. I had to pull my cloak up to cover my head and face, but the thin fabric offered no protection against the bone, chilling cold. The fingers left exposed first ached, then went numb, until even bending them became difficult. The wolf inside me paced restlessly, channeling every ounce of heat it could muster toward my heart and abdomen. But even it was nearing its limit. Even a wolf could sense that this blizzard didn't feel like natural weather. It felt more like the mountain range itself was rejecting me, an intruder. I pressed my hand against my lower abdomen. Through my clothes, I could almost feel the warmth. There was slightly higher than elsewhere. This little one, not even 2 months old, didn't yet beat as fast as my own heart, yet was already sustaining me with its faint presence. Whenever I was on the verge of collapsing, a small wave of warmth would surge from that spot, like a tiny, tiny hand scratching at my heart, telling me, "Mom, don't stop." I didn't know how long I'd been walking. Time had lost all meaning in the blizzard. Day and night had churned into a grayish, white sludge. My lips were cracked, and every breath carried the taste of blood. Yet my ears picked up a sound that shouldn't have been here in this wasteland. The sound of hooves. No wolf hooves. The massive wolf's paws crushed the frozen crust of snow, producing a dull, cracking sound, one after another, chaotic and urgent, as if a pack were conducting a fan-shaped search. I ducked abruptly into a snowdrift behind a massive boulder, cupping my hand over my mouth to stifle my pounding heart. The wind and snow had masked my scent. This was likely the only time fate had ever been on my side. Through a crack in the rock, I watched 3 massive black wolves sweep past about 200 paces away, ridden by wolf clan hunters I recognized, the most elite trackers under Kane's command. Their eyes glowed an eerie green in the blizzard, the primal instinct of a wolf when tracking a target with all its might. They kept their heads low, noses pressed against the snow, combing the terrain inch by inch from west to east, like a giant comb. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was about to leap out of my throat. But just as they were about to reach the giant rock, the lead wolf suddenly came to a halt, snorted and shook its head. The rider pulled on the reins and gestured in another direction, and the 3 of them turned as one, charging toward the northern mountain pass. It took me a full 3 seconds to realize they'd been lured away by something. Almost at the same moment, the pendant on my chest flashed again. A silvery blue light shone through my collar, spreading softly in the snowy mist, just enough to cover the area where I was hiding. In that moment, it suddenly dawned on me. This pendant wasn't just capable of rewriting bonds, it was alive. It was actively protecting me, or more accurately, clearing the path for the child within me. I lowered my head and murmured a thank you so soft, it was almost inaudible, then gritted my teeth and pressed on. My legs were barely responding. Every step felt like pulling a stake from quicksand. The snow had piled up above my knees, and I could rely only on instinct. No, not instinct. It was another, more ancient force guiding me. The pendant on my chest grew hotter and hotter. Whenever I headed in the right direction, its temperature rose. Whenever I strayed, it quickly cooled. And so, step by step, it pulled me through the blizzard's barest barrier. Then, the wind suddenly stopped. It didn't fade away gradually. It was as if someone had flipped a massive switch right in front of me. Snowflakes hung suspended in midair, drifting down quietly, no longer swirling wildly. The air grew clear and still, so still that I could hear my own heartbeat, and that faint, almost imperceptible second rhythm within my belly. I lifted my head and gazed ahead with eyes so frozen they could barely open. In that moment, all the fatigue, the cold, the fear, melted into scalding tears, welling up from the depths of my soul. The temple of the moon. It stood there. No, it was as if it had grown there. Not a single stone had been laid in the structure. Instead, it was naturally embraced by 6 massive ancient trees, their canopies intertwined to form a dome soaring into the clouds. Moonlight flowed down every branch, not reflected light, but a silvery liquid, like glow seeping from the very heart of the trees. It dripped from every branch, falling into the snow and transforming the entire ground into a vast silver mirror. The air was filled with a scent I had never encountered before. Not the fragrance of flowers, nor the scent of wood, but the scent of moonlight itself. If moonlight could be smelled, it would be this pure, soul-stirring fragrance. I knelt down. It wasn't a deliberate act. My legs simply gave way the moment my feet touched the ground. My knees sank into the silvery snow. No pain, only an overwhelming sense of belonging. This place had been waiting for me for a long time, or rather, it had been waiting for my bloodline for a long time. The pendant rose from my collar, breaking free from the cord that held it, and hung before my eyes, spinning rapidly and emitting a humming vibration. Immediately, the light from the entire temple surged toward me, enveloping me like a tide, lifting my entire body and carrying me toward the circular altar at the very center of the 6 ancient trees. The altar was carved with ancient characters identical to those on the pendant's surface. The moment the pendant settled into the central groove of the altar, all the characters lit up, and a pillar of light shot straight into the heavens, splitting the night sky over the entire mountain range in two. And as I stood there, I heard a voice. It wasn't a sound in my ears, but a voice that poured directly into my soul, ancient and majestic, yet wrapped in a motherly tenderness. You have brought the moon goddess's tear. So, are you prepared to pay the price? I looked up at the ethereal figure emerging from the beam of light, a fragment of the moon goddess's divine spirit left behind in the mortal realm. She was a woman shrouded in silver light, her face expressionless, yet her eyes held millennia of compassion and sorrow. What price? I asked, my voice hoarse. The child in your womb. My blood ran cold in that instant. Instinctively, I clasped my hands over my lower abdomen, took a step back, and clenched my teeth so hard they ground together. No, it couldn't be. This child was the one I protected with my life, the one I'd give up everything to save. If the price was him, then nothing would have any meaning. Number. I uttered a single word, my voice soft but more resolute than anything I'd ever said in my life. You can take my life, but not my child. The shadowy figure did not grow angry, but simply gazed at me quietly, the pity in its eyes growing deeper. Such are the rules. To rewrite the bonds of fate, to bring the hidden truth to light, you must sacrifice the most precious thing in your life. You must decide for yourself, is vengeance more important, or is this child? I stood there, the roar of the light beam in my ears turning into a shrill mockery. I lowered my head, staring at my slender fingers, at the traces of blood and dirt still clinging between them, as tears fell silently. I recalled Kane's cold gaze, Emily's foot thrust toward me, the moonstone bracelet that should have been mine, the sympathetic glances the maids had cast my way in secret, and the despair of kneeling beneath the full moon all night long, ignored by everyone. The desire for revenge burned like fire in my chest. I wanted Kane to kneel before me and admit his wrongdoing. I wanted the woman who had taken everything from me to kneel and beg for my forgiveness. I wanted the whole world to know that I was not just the abandoned Luna, but a living person worthy of love. But as my fingers rested on my lower abdomen, that faint warmth returned. This child had done nothing wrong. He didn't even know who his father was, nor what his mother was going through. He was merely a tiny, unformed life, yet he had already learned to share his warmth with me in the cold. I won't trade. I took the pendant from the altar and clenched it in my palm. My voice trembled so much it was barely audible, but every word was firm and resolute. I don't want revenge or the truth anymore. That man isn't worth my guilt, and he certainly isn't worth trading my child for. I turned and walked out. The light of the temple contracted rapidly behind me, like a gate closing. But just as my foot touched the first step, the phantom's voice rang out once more, and this time her tone had changed. No longer the icy test, but a sense of relief that was almost tinged with a smile. You have passed. I whipped my head around to see the ethereal figure fading away, while the scattered light gathered once more, all surging into the pendant in my hand. The pendant split in two in the palm of my hand, and a liquid oozed from the crack. Not water, but liquid light. It crept up my arm, seeped into my veins, and merged with my heart. The true cost has never been sacrificing what you hold most dear. It is the moment, when faced with the exchange, that you choose to let go of hatred. You have already done so. From now on, the moon goddess's tear belongs to you. You may use it to do one thing, but only once. Use it to protect the one you truly wish to protect. My hand still rested on my lower abdomen, and in that moment, I suddenly felt an unprecedented warmth radiating from the palm of my hand, as if a child had rolled over ever so slightly inside me, telling me in his own way, "Mom, you made the right choice." The moment I stepped out of the moon temple, the whole world felt different. It wasn't that the mountains had changed, nor that the snow had changed. It was I who had changed. That liquid light that had fused with my heart flowed quietly through my veins, like a warm river healing every wound in its path. The cracks on the soles of my feet, my frostbitten fingers, the cheek lacerated by thorns, and even that thread on my chest, torn to shreds by the bonds, were all gradually mending. But it wasn't the feeling of complete healing. It was more like being gently wrapped in an ancient, powerful force. The pain had subsided for now, but the scars remained, reminding me of everything I had endured. I stood beneath the ancient tree at the temple's entrance and looked up at the sky. The blizzard had completely stopped. A massive gash had torn open in the clouds, revealing the full moon, round and bright white, to the point of transparency, like an eye surveying all living things. Moonlight bathed the snow, covered mountains and valleys, coating the entire shadow range in a layer of crisp, silvery glow. I took a deep breath of the cold, crisp air, then raised my hand, palm up, watching the silver blue threads of light, lingering on my fingertips, slowly seep into my skin. Suddenly, I smiled. So this is what it feels like to be chosen by the moon goddess. It's not about becoming stronger, nor about becoming more noble, but a sense of certainty. You know who you are, you know where you're going, and you know that no one can ever shake you again. But my certainty didn't last long. For the moment I stepped outside the boundaries of the moon goddess's sanctuary, that bond I'd suppressed for so long surged back violently, like a red-hot chain clamping down on my heart. My knees buckled and I nearly collapsed into the snow. An image of Kane flashed before my eyes. He had already entered the mountains, had already crossed the blizzard zone, accompanied not only by wolf clan hunters, but also by Emily. The image was so vivid, so clear, that I could see Emily sitting atop a massive white wolf, draped in Kane's wolf fur cloak, her face as pale as paper, her lips turning blue, her entire body teetering on the brink of collapse. Yet her eyes kept glancing at Kane beside her, and I knew that look all too well. It was a mix of hurt and vulnerability, that I'm in so much pain, but I'm holding it in, act capable of softening any alpha's heart. And Kane, that alpha who had once cut through thousands of enemies on the battlefield, was now turning his head to look at her, a deep furrow etched between his brows, his lips pressed into a tight line. I could feel his restlessness, could feel the chaos deep within him that was driving him to the brink of madness. His concern for Emily was real, but so was his anguish over his missing wife. These two emotions were tearing at each other inside him, like two beasts trapped in the same cage, neither willing to yield, ultimately tearing him in two. He didn't understand yet. He still couldn't see clearly. The Blackstone tribe's blinding spell was like a layer of mud smeared over his bonds, preventing him from distinguishing between the pull of the moon goddess and the illusions created by the spell. He thought his concern for Emily was love, but he didn't realize it was merely a rope, carefully woven by others, looped around his neck, and that he was walking step by step toward the edge of a cliff. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms. The pain brought me back to my senses. He must not find me, at least not now. If I appeared before him like this, he would take me back, bind me with the bonds, command me with an alpha's authority, and the tears of the woman by his side would blind him to any truth. I needed a more opportune moment, a moment that would force him to open his eyes. So I tore a strip of cloth from my cloak, wrapped it tightly around my hands to ward off frostbite, and turned to walk deeper into the mountains. The power of the moon temple flowed through me, making me more resistant to the cold than before and sharpening my senses for direction and danger. But the awakening of this power also brought a change I hadn't anticipated. My wolf had grown quieter, not the quiet of weakness, but a kind of hibernation, like the stillness before a storm. It was gathering strength, waiting, preparing for something. I wasn't sure what this meant, but the child in my womb seemed to sense it. That tiny, faint warmth began to pulsate rhythmically, about every 3 seconds, like a little heart beating steadily. I stopped in the snow, looked down at my belly, and tears fell without warning, not out of sadness, but because in that moment I finally felt it with absolute certainty. He was alive, a life of his own, my son. He was telling me in his own rhythm, "Mommy, don't be afraid, I'm here." I wiped my tears away roughly with the back of my hand and continued on. The terrain began to grow steep. Beneath the snow lay countless invisible crevasses and loose rocks, so I had to tread with extreme caution with every step. After walking for about 2 hours, I saw a frozen lake appear ahead. The lake was vast, shaped like a crescent moon with a missing sliver. The ice reflected the full moon overhead, casting a deep azure blue, like an eye opened by the earth, quietly gazing at the sky. And on the opposite shore of the lake, a figure stood. I came to an abrupt halt, pressing myself against the rock face and hiding in the shadows. In that instant, my heart raced to its limit. The figure stood beside a massive black wolf. Clad in dark wolf fur armor, he had his back to me, his broad shoulders slightly hunched. One hand rested on the wolf's neck, as if he were using it to steady himself while catching his breath. There were no other rangers with him, nor was Emily there. He had come alone. That man was Kane, no more than 500 paces away. Separated by a lake, he couldn't find me, but I could see him clearly. His armor was caked with ice shards, and his shoulders and arms bore several gashes from ice blades. The blood seeping from them hadn't had time to freeze before being evaporated by the intense heat of his wolf blood, leaving behind streaks of dark brown bloodstains. His hair was toused by the wind. The leather cord that usually held it back had fallen off somewhere, and strands of hair fell across his face, making him look less like a king and more like a cornered beast with nowhere to run. He suddenly stirred. His wolf sensed something before he did. The massive beast let out a low whine and rubbed its huge head against his arm, as if trying to nudge him in a certain direction. But Kane didn't move. He merely lifted his head to gaze at the full moon overhead, and then, something I never in my wildest dreams expected to witness, he dropped to his knees. His knees struck the ice-cracked lakeshore, With a dull thud, he removed the wolf's tooth necklace hanging around his neck, the alpha token passed down through generations of the Northern family, the sacred object he had held in his hand when he swore his oath to the moon goddess at his coronation. He pressed the wolf's tooth against his forehead, closed his eyes, and his lips trembled violently. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could feel the bond trembling violently, every single thread being desperately infused with his will. He was praying. Kane Northen, the alpha who had never bowed his head to any god, was kneeling on the frozen ground deep in the mountains, praying to the moon goddess, and his prayer, transmitted through the bond, finally reached me. Every word and phrase felt as though it had been carved from the very core of his heart. Give her back to me. His voice was so hoarse, it barely sounded like his own. I don't care what the truth is. Even if Blackstone's curse is real, even if my feelings for Emily were a lie from the very beginning. I don't care. I don't care about being deceived. I don't care about being manipulated. I don't care about dignity or pride. I just want her back. Moon goddess, can you hear me? Bring her back. You can take everything from me, but give me my Selena back. My fingers dug into the cracks in the rock face. My knuckles clenched so tightly they felt like they might shatter. Tears streamed silently down my cheeks, falling onto the snow and burning small holes in it. In that moment, I almost burst out of the shadows. I wanted to run to him, pull him up from the ground, grab his shoulders and shake him, make him repeat those words so I could be sure I hadn't heard wrong. But I didn't, because my reason told me that those words, his current breakdown and agony, were all real. But the crux of the matter has never been about truth or falsehood. It lies in this: when the sun rises tomorrow, when he stands once more within the castle, when Emily gazes at him again with those tear-filled eyes, will he still remember the words he spoke tonight beneath the full moon? Can he withstand the relentless erosion of the Blackstone curse? Can he choose me resolutely, standing between me and his pack, his interests, and his alpha's dignity? I can't take that gamble. I can't afford to. I've already gambled away 7 years' worth of trust in that marriage, and now I'm left with nothing. So I let go, pressed my back against the cold rock wall, closed my eyes, and bit down hard on my lower lip until I tasted the metallic tang of blood. I couldn't move, couldn't make a sound, couldn't let our bond convey any response. I had to drive him to the brink of madness, let his guilt and fear burn through his last layer of pretense, leave him with no way out, no excuses, and no one to make excuses for him. Only then would he truly see himself. I placed my hand over my lower abdomen, feeling the child's steady heartbeat. I took a deep breath, turned, and tiptoed away along the shadows of the lakeshore. Kane remained kneeling there, at the edge of that frozen lake, in the dead of night, when he thought no one was watching, like a sculpture pinned to the ground by moonlight. But he would never know I had seen him. He would never know that his final, hoarse, shattered cry of Selena, every syllable of it, had fallen into my ears and been seared into my very bones. It was the first time in 7 years that he had called me by my name correctly.